Hey everybody, it's your girl Nell, and welcome to another episode of Simply Nell's Tiny Studio. And I'm your girl Nell, and this is a crochet and chat or crochet along with Nell type of video. I'm trying new things out in the tiny studio all the time, and so I thought that I would, instead of being having my face on camera, that I would just show you some of the things that I'm doing in the tiny studio, especially as far as crocheting goes. I haven't crocheted in about 2.5, almost 3 weeks, and that is a long stretch of time for me to go when it comes to not crocheting. And so today I thought that I would just catch up in the tiny studio with you guys. Thank you so much for subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much for being a tiny studio guest. I really appreciate it. If you would like to become a tiny studio members lounge only member, then what you're going to have to do is look for that link in the description box and follow that link and become a members only lounge member. Oh, did I say that right? Become a member of the Tiny Studio Lounge, okay? We have a lot of great things happening over there. I give updates about the channel. I, inform you of certain things that's going on and happening to me in real time. And I really don't get a chance to say a lot of things here publicly that I can do about myself and my family over in the lounge. So join us in the lounge for some wine and some really great conversation. All right, so as I said, I haven't crocheted at all in about 3 weeks since I've come home from my mini vacation in Detroit. And when I was there, or while I was there, I brought along some granny squares to crochet. And what I did was I brought these tiny squares with me. And my plan was to go ahead and add a few more rows in a different color to these little squares, which I did. So here is what the tiny granny square looked like. And then while I was, talking to my grandmother, chatting and catching up with her, then I will go ahead and add another row in a different color. And let me see. Here's a full granny square, completed granny square. I believe this is 2 rows. And that came from these tiny little granny squares. The idea is to make enough squares to be able to complete a granny square like quilt blanket for my grandmother. I was hoping to have completed it before I went home last month, but I did not get the opportunity to do so. So right now I am busy trying to come up with the squares, enough squares to be able to complete the job. I estimated that I would need probably about I want to say 87 different squares to complete the blanket, but that was my last guesstimate. Right now I have 77 squares completed. So it's just all about having discipline and just discipline basically, and being consistent and getting the job done. So while I was in the D, I was able to continue to put my granny squares together. And so that's what I'm going to do tonight with you guys, is I'm going to be working on some granny squares. And as I'm working on the granny squares, then you and I can do some catch up, play a little catch up today. How you feel about that? You feel positive about that? And then if you have any projects that you're working on, hey, if you're working on granny squares, that's really great. Whatever crochet project you may have going on, go ahead and pick that up and let's crochet together, all right? Okay, I'm going to put these aside. So I was working with, I'm not really good with picking with matching colors too much. I think that I am, but I'm not quite sure if I am. I think that I am. I could be, but these are the colors that I put together. So you have, you know, this, and then you have some of the purple, yellow, and whites, you know. Then you have, you know, baby colors, pink, white, and yellow. And then I did this with the pink on the outer part. So the granny square, 2 rows of white, and then a purple in the middle. And then you have the red. So these are the granny squares I was able to complete at my grandmother's house. Okay, it's not a lot, but you know, I was really doing a lot of things. So let me see if I can grab my let me grab my crochet hook and my snippers, and let me get started. So let me see, what do I have left? I have this little tiny square. And some of the I see there's a mistake there. Some of the squares that I've made, granny squares I've made in the past, which would be like in the last 5 or 6 years. I have like a really giant bag of just granny squares, small ones, big ones, you know. And a lot, when I was learning how to make granny squares, a lot of my granny squares are imperfect. But I realized that even though they are imperfect, you know, they are a testament to me learning. So I'm going to continue to use them because, you know, they're granny squares. They may not be the best looking, but they, you know, I still put time into them. And then I'm going to add maybe another round to these granny squares. I do believe I was going to finish working on these while I was talking to my grandmother in her room. Maybe that's what I'll do right now. I'll use, since I used this color pink on these, I'll use this particular color to finish the rounds off on these 3 granny squares. All right, so let's get started, huh? So I started learning how to make granny squares maybe about, I guess now, maybe 8 or 9 years ago. They just really fascinated me, and I really wanted to learn how to make them. And I tried and tried and tried, and I just, you know, I could not, for some reason, get the method of how to make them. And I watched so many videos, so many tutorials. Like here is an imperfect granny square right here. Yeah, that's an imperfect one, but that's okay. I'm still going to use it anyway. And that just goes to show you, you can still, no matter what, you still have a role to play in life, you know. You may not feel that your part in life may be vital or important, but you still have a role in this square. And these squares, even though they are imperfect, they're going to make up a very beautiful gift for my grandmother. So, you know, just because something is imperfect, that does not mean that it cannot be used, that it's not vital, and it doesn't mean that it cannot play an important part as being one of a collective. Okay. All right. So I have my snippers here. So let me get started. Yeah. Anyhow, I had a very, I watched a lot of videos of people making granny squares. Personally, I like Jada and Stitches. I like the way she made granny squares, and I watched her so many times, I think, and I kept saying, I can't do it, I can't do it, and I would try and try and try, and I just wouldn't seem, I just could not seem to get it right. And so that was a problem. So I have a lot of granny squares that just look, you know, horrific. Do not look well at all. And then I learned that granny squares is about math, because you have to remember that you're working a square. Okay. Another thing you have to remember is that with granny squares, you have double crochet clusters, and then you have corners. So in the corners, you have to know how to navigate a corner. And I'm coming up on a corner right now. So granny square clusters are double crochet stitches in sets of 3. Okay. And a 3 makes a cluster. So here's the third granny square double crochet. Now I'm going to hit a corner. So in this corner, I'm going to start off by making a cluster of double crochets, which will be 3 double crochets. Okay. All right. And here's the good part. Then we're going to chain 2. 1, 2. Okay. Then I'm going to make another set of, there you go. And see, that's how you navigate the corner. Yep. See how I did that? Yep. It's always 2 clusters in a corner. So the first set of clusters, then the chain 2, and then the second set of cluster of double crochet clusters. And then you just continue. And I kept making mistakes. I think the biggest mistake that I made was the corners. Getting my corners right. That was always, you know, the craziest mistake that I would make, and that's why my granny squares will come out looking wonky. And another thing, a secret that about granny squares that I've learned, especially when you're turning your granny squares into a blanket, or when you decide to, you know, grow them into a blanket, one of the things that I learned is that you should turn every 2 to 3 rows. Turn your work, and that keeps your granny square from becoming just a big wonky mess. I was reading Janie Crowfoot, her book, I think it's called The Perfect Crochet Finish. I'm going to do a book review on it. Let me look up here on the shelf. Yeah, it's called The Perfect Crochet Finish, but I really think the book was called her book that talked about crochet. I think it was the Ultimate Crochet Bible. It was one of them, and I really enjoyed it because she talks about that, you know, how to keep your granny square from becoming wonky and looking lopsided and everything. And the key is simply to turn your work. Turn your work. She was saying, and a couple other crochet artists have said that when you're making a granny square, if you find that your granny square is becoming wonky, even just like right now, making your granny square, if you notice that it's becoming wonky, what you can do is you can turn your work each row. So that means turn your granny square over each row. It's something about this yarn that I do not like. And the thing that I do not like is the fact that it splits on you. And I found out the reason why yarn splits. And it's basically because not just because of the caliber or the material or fibers that's that make up the final product, which is yarn. It's also the way the yarn is spun, because there are two different ways that yarn can be spun. It can be spun in an S pattern, and it can be spun in a Z pattern. And most yarns are spun in the S pattern, and it's usually in the S pattern because a lot of yarn manufacturers favor knitters as opposed to crocheters. And the way knitters knit, the S pattern of a yarn is better for them. And it's also better for left-handed crocheters. But when you want to, if you are a right-handed crocheter, you may find that your S spun yarn, comes apart, and it's just, it gets on my nerves, but I just do the best that I can. I've also found that a lot of different types of crochet hooks contribute to your yarn, pulling apart like that. I know that my Furl Streamline wood crochet hooks, they contribute to a lot of splitting in my yarn, so I don't use them for these projects. I use my clover hook, and actually I use my clover hooks for everything because I just love the way it feels. And if you're going to be crocheting for extended periods of time, you need something that's going to work really well in your hand and that feels really good. And I found that the clover hooks work very, very well for me. I just really enjoy them. I'm getting ready to invest in another furls hook, and I just love furl hooks so much. I use them a lot when I'm making blankets, and there is one blanket that I'm working on right now, and I'm working on the ruffles for it, and I'm using one of my furls hooks. But furls have two new lines or collections, and I am really excited about them, and I'm going to pick one up. I think one was this black line. I think it's called the Onyx line. I'm not sure but I'm going to check it out. I think in my furls basket I have one of the I want to say it's called the Onyx. That's the name of the collection, but I'm not sure. But it's black. But the crochet hook is all black, and it has a metal, metal hook, and I liked it. And then they had this other one that looked like it had like different colors of the rainbow in it. I'm not sure, but it was just so beautiful. So I am really considering purchasing it. So we'll see. It's in my box. So, when I shop, I like to buy, if I like something, I buy it in every color or whatnot. But, furls is just, you can do that with furls, but, sometimes, due to the high demand of furls, sometimes you can, by the time I get to the site, they're out of certain vital sizes that I need. So, if you don't have, well, in my case, I do have an email and they do send things to my account. But since it goes straight to the spam box, I don't get to see the sales and the different specials that furls have. And, by the time I get to the furls website, they're out of it. They sold out. So here is the finished Granny Square. Okay, I'll put that in that pile over there. So look, here is another imperfect Granny Square. And it doesn't make any sense for me to try to take it apart and do anything else to it. I could, but what for? I'm cool. I don't have a problem with it. And I have, you know, a whole bag full of granny squares. So I'm not necessarily, oh, I did say I was going to finish this, right? I'm not going to sit back and, you know, undo some things because, you know, I was learning and I want everything to be perfect. Because, you know, guess what? Everything cannot be perfect and it shouldn't be perfect. And it's a testament to, you know, learning, right? And it did. It took me some time to learn how to, you know, so I'm starting, and what I'm doing right now is I'm getting ready to make a chain of 3. Some people chain 2, but I chain 3. Okay, and now I'm getting ready to start with the first. That chain that I made will be considered a double crochet, and so then now I'm going to make 2 more. And this is the 3rd one. And then I have my cluster there. That over there. But anyhow, I just love making granny squares. So I stopped making them for a while because I was just really disappointed with the fact that I wasn't catching on. And I was just making, I felt like I was making a fool of myself, but it's really all part of the learning experience. It's all about growth. And so I just, you know, I stopped. I put it aside. And I just kept watching videos. I kept watching tutorials on granny squares by different other YouTubers or YouTubers from the crochet world. So like Tony from TL Yarn Crafts, and who else? I did say Jada and Stitches, right? And it was somebody else. It was a young lady from Britain that or the UK that I watched make granny squares. And then I started watching this young sister from the UK, and Heather from HDC Crochet, and she's, like I said, she's here on YouTube. Beautiful young sister, and I started watching her religiously because she is like the granny square queen. She's a beautiful granny square designer. And I have been watching her for so long. She's a married lady now, has a son and everything. But I was watching her when she was dating. She and her husband were dating. I was watching her when she and her boyfriend broke up. I was watching her go through the grief of a relationship, or the breakup of a relationship. And she was just going through so much and still working and designing beautiful granny square items. And then I watched this I was watching when she and her ex-boyfriend got back together, and then they became engaged, and then they got married, and you know, next thing Heather is pregnant with her first baby. It was just so amazing. And just watching her live her life as a crochet designer, and just watching her put out different patterns, and you know, even though she was going through a very, very difficult time, you know, with her pregnancy and everything, she still, you know, she didn't give up. And I love watching people on YouTube like that who are so inspirational. And it was just from watching her that made me try it again, made me pick up the crochet hook and, you know, try one more time at making granny squares. And I'm so glad that I did, because I've been making granny afghans now for about, I want to say about 6 years. And, you know, they're not always perfect looking things. You know, not always. You know, but neither are we. When I wake up in the morning, I'm not always looking 100%. You know, when I bake a cake, it's not always the prettiest thing. You know, sometimes, you know, things are born the way they are supposed to be born, right? And you see the beauty in the imperfections, right? Yes. So, you know, like I see some things right here. I must have been half asleep when I did this. I was sitting in my grandmother's room talking to her. And I love talking to my grandmother at night because that's when I'm fully awake. And even though she is, you know, not fully awake, she will sit there and have a really good conversation with me. And I appreciate that. I can call my grandmother up at any time during the night and she will wake up and have a conversation with me. And, you know, I love that. My grandmother is 93 years old. Yep, she is 93. And, you know, she will hold a good conversation. She does, and she doesn't do the No, she asks questions. She asks questions. She gives advice. She does all of the things. So I call my grandmother at 3 o'clock in the morning just to yak. Shoo. My grandmother be all in. And then she'll say, well, Nell, let me get on over here and get some sleep because I got to do this and that and the other in the morning. Oh, I'm just sleepy. And I'll be like, okay, Fee, I'll let you go. Talk to you later. And she always know when it's me that's calling because I usually call like around 2 or something like that in the morning because I can't sleep. And she'll answer the phone. I'll just be sitting there talking, catching her up on what's going on here in Florida. What kind of antics her granddaughter's up to now. My grandmother has this beautiful crochet blanket on her bed, and I didn't get a chance to take a picture of it, but it was given to her as a gift from a woman that she worked for. And the woman that she worked for, her sister was a crochet designer and made the blanket for my grandmother. It's a beautiful gift. My grandmother has it on her bed right now. And it's just so pretty. And the thing is that my grandmother has had that particular blanket in the house for many years. You know, I remember seeing it. It's got to be about 30 years old or so. And it's been in the house since the 90s, early 90s. I want to also say maybe the late 80s or so. And I was looking at it when she was lying down, and I just thought, I said, that the blanket is so beautiful. Why am I just now really appreciating it? And then, you know, my grandmother was like, well, because you're supposed to right now, you're supposed to look at it. You're supposed to see it and admire it. You wasn't supposed to, you know, appreciate it then because you didn't really understand the beauty of crochet and yarn and the intricacies of making a pattern. She said, but you know, you do understand now. So you know, this is the right time for you to, you know, appreciate it. And so I was just looking at it. It was just so beautiful. And I told you I made my grandmother, one of the first items that I designed was a giant king size single crochet Afghan. And I made that and gave that to my grandmother. And that Afghan is in her blue room. Blue is my grandmother's favorite color. So the colors of that Afghan are blue and gray. And then the trim on it, I finished it by making, I made pom-poms. I made crochet pom-poms or balls as an edging on the Afghan. That Afghan took me a whole year and a half to make. I was like, oh my God, when am I going to finish this? When am I ever going to finish it? And then I was making it and sending pictures. And then my mother said, I want one. I want a crochet blanket too. So, you know, my mother's colors, her colors are red and black. Her dining room and living room are red and black. So I started getting everything together to make her blanket. And when I would run out of yarn on my grandmother's blanket, then I would start working on my mother's blanket. And when I would run out of yarn on my mother's blanket, then I would switch over to my grandmother's blanket. It was insane. But I finally finished both of those projects. I finished my grandmother's first, of course, and then I finished my mother's blanket. And I used a chunky, heavyweight yarn for my mother, and that blanket was very, very heavy. And then the border was made with the I finished it with a shell pattern stitch for the edging, and that just turned out so beautiful. All right then, well, I'm going to let you go. I made finished a couple of squares here, but I will check you guys out next time here in the Tiny Studio. And this was just Crochet and Chat with Nell. And maybe next time I'll pull out one of my Afghans and work on that while we sit and have a nice little chat. So I'll talk to you guys soon, okay? Bye-bye.